It's time for another Bible thumping wingnut Google Hangout and podcast with Matt Slick from carm.org. And now, here's your host, Tim, the Bible thumping wingnut.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Bible Thumping Wingnut Podcast. This is episode number 174. It is May 22, 2016. And there, I did it right, ladies and gentlemen. How professional was that? No feedback, no nothing. I was so nervous, though. Now I lost my complete train of thought as to what I'm supposed to say here in the opening, but... There, I did it. Welcome those of you listening on Mixlr. Just to let you know, you folks know, if you don't want to watch us, if you would rather not see our faces, you can always go to Mixlr. The link to listen to Mixlr is in the description of this video, or you can go to BibleThumping.com and you can get the link there to just listen on Mixlr. Bible Thumping Wingnut is a ministry of striving for eternity. Andrew Rappaport is here, Matt Slick is here, and this is an open Google Hangout. That means anybody, as long as there's a room, you can enter the Google Hangout and ask any questions, make statements. We pretty much just talk about Christianity and those who disagree with Christianity. And that's what we do here every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We would like to hear your feedback. You want your feedback read. Don't put it necessarily in a YouTube comment. Email me at BibleThumpingWingnut@gmail.com. I'll be sure to read it then, because usually I'm unable to read all the comments on the videos. So you could do that. We would appreciate it. If you are a Christian and you appreciate this ministry here, please consider helping us out financially. Some of you do, and we greatly appreciate it. And yeah, you can go to BibleThumpingWingnut.com to get the link to support us on Patreon. We would appreciate that. And I see you guys making comments. It's distracting me. What are you guys saying? Welcome to the show, Matt Slick and Andrew Rappaport. What are you guys saying here?
We're just congratulating you on being able to do an awesome job at the opening of the show for the first time in 170-some episodes.
Actually, I did it right many times, and I started to get too fancy with it. So now I just broke it down to the simplest.
So I think that Matt needs to take you to his school of ADD, where you could do multiple things at once. You could type notes while discussing with atheists at the same time of having a logical thought that you're coherently making, and keeping your notes up to date. Searching online.
Are you saying Susan?
He did not. He did not do a good job last week multitasking, because once our Mormon friend left, he continued to engage.
Yeah, I kept talking to the Mormon guy.
And I think the Christian guy who was on, I don't know that didn't go too smooth. You were so distracted.
Well, let's focus on something. What do you guys want to talk about?
Well, we've got we do have one of the folks that I was talking to on Twitter. He has joined. I see you in the Google, and I need you to tell me what you would like us to refer to you as, okay? Because I see your name on Google is not how I know you on Twitter, but I see the picture is the same. So if you have a specific name you would like me to refer to you as, I don't want to give away any more information about you than you may or may not want me to. So hopefully you know how to comment in the Google Hangout.
Well, you could refer to him from his Twitter handle then, right?
I don't know how to pronounce it. That maybe you do, because I sent you. So Matt Slick, speaking of last week, I think you converted a whole lot of atheists to Mormonism Um, it, any part of the debate, whatever
Yeah.
side of the debate you take, the non-believing professing atheists, they jump on the other side.
Well,
So
that's because they're
we
so objective, and
we have
they
so
don't have
many
any bigotry or prejudice or hypocrisy at all, which is why they can see things like that. But it is interesting that it would make sense, the idea of becoming gods and the atheistic thinking of that basically you're already God, determining what is right and wrong and moral and not moral. So there's not that far of a jump.
there was a lot of comments, people agreeing with um, the Mormon guy, people who don't believe in God at all. They're like, oh yeah, he made great arguments. Oh boy, he made Matt Slick look so bad. But
Yeah, yeah, it's always the case. Yeah, somehow it's always the case that the atheists, in their objectivity, will just denounce anything I do and say. But I just look at it this way: I'm a threat to them. They know it, and they don't want to have a discussion with me. There's a guy on Facebook that I've been trying to get to come here for a few weeks. This guy is full of invectives, condemnation, misrepresentation, logical fallacies, prejudices, bigotry, and come on here, and he doesn't want to do it. But anything that is said and done, he will try and use it as justification for his atheism, and that is the way of atheism. It's just what it is. It's unfortunate, but what do you expect? People who don't think very clearly.
all right, I am going to add Kelvin to the broadcast. I'm going to turn his microphone up. Kelvin, are you there?
Yes, I am.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine.
I
I don't know if you heard me earlier, but I was trying to say my name is Amadeus. I'd rather be referred to as Amadeus.
Amadeus.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I did not hear you. You had your microphone down. Amadeus, welcome to the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast. I appreciate you showing up. You're rather vocal on Twitter, and I
Yes,
think
sir.
you like to go on Periscope and smoke and talk about and, and talk about your opinion about whether God exists or not. And
Yes, sir.
here you have many Christians, and it wouldn't quite be right for all of us to debate you. We have one main apologist that's here. His name is Matt Slick from carm.org. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but
Yes,
we
sir.
kind of let.
I actually watched a debate of his not too long ago between him and Dan Barker,
Mm-hmm.
and that was pretty interesting.
Which debate?
Um, I'm not sure. It was only one that I saw. I
Was
had
it the
just
one where
heard
my
of you.
voice did my voice tank on that one?
Yes, sir. In the beginning, you were having a lot of trouble with
Yeah.
you were
They give
a
you
little sick or whatnot.
a little bit of a background. This is a really short version. I'm not making this up. I wrote about it because it was so whacked. Um, I ended up having 2 canceled flights, a missed flight, and getting there 3 hours before the venue with basically no rest. I had 20 minutes of rest. Had to get ready and go. And then on the way back home, a missed flight and a canceled flight also. It was just really something. And then my voice tanked, and I have no no clue why. It just went south. That was an interesting 3 days. It really was.
Wow.
But yeah, just one of those things that happens, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I understand that.
It did throw
Um,
me off too, my opening statement, because I didn't have enough time. I should have asked for a 10-minute break so I could at least try and get my voice back because it was going. But yeah, that's what it is. No big deal.
right. Happens to the best of us. So,
It does. You're an
Armad-
atheist?
yes, I am an atheist.
Can I ask you why you are?
Um,
Or did you
I
have questions for me?
well, I was invited on the show, so I figured
Okay.
you all would have questions for me. I didn't know how it was going to go exactly,
Okay.
because I'm in the middle of trying to organize my own podcast. Um, so we were dealing with that and trying to communicate when this was going to happen and everything. So I'm pretty much unprepared, and I'm just going to go with the flow.
Okay. Why are you an atheist?
I am an atheist because I don't find the arguments for God compelling. I used to be a Christian. I was raised Baptist, and was a firm believer until I was around like 15. That's when I really started having doubts and everything. I, dug deep into the Bible, started reading it, um, and comparing it to, I guess, my academic knowledge and stuff like that. And to me, it just didn't add up. As I grew up and as I gained more knowledge or whatnot. So,
got an example of something? Like one, we can tackle one at a time, or just curious.
Well, I mean, I guess what you could say about Noah's Ark, the story didn't really add up with.
With what?
I guess it doesn't really make sense in a.
What doesn't make sense?
The entire story of Noah.
Why doesn't it make sense?
Well, I think honestly, I don't want to deal with that right now. At
brought
this
it up.
moment.
I mean, you got
I did bring it up, but you did ask me about it. So let me bring the conversation back to why I'm an atheist, because that's the original topic. I'm an atheist. After comparing the Bible to my academic knowledge and everything, don't want to go into the specifics of what as of yet, because that's not the question. I started to realize that things didn't add up, things didn't match, things didn't make sense to me, and that I didn't have a real factual thing to base my belief in Jesus on. And I struggled with it for a while. I claimed to be agnostic for a while. I went back to being a believer for a while. But the more I tried and the more I called out to God, the more I tried to really earnestly believe and find truth in my belief, I just failed every time. So eventually I felt that I was lying to myself, and around the age of 22, I admitted to myself that I was a non-believer. I didn't believe in the existence of God, and I should be, an atheist.
Hey, can I interrupt real quick? Are you able to turn your television down? Because we're getting background.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Where are we at, Matt?
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, great.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay.
Well, there's lots of things I could say about all of that, but I don't know if you want to have a discussion or if you want to ask questions or what.
Well, why do you believe in a God? I guess I should ask.
Because when I was 17, the Lord Jesus himself came to me. I couldn't see him or touch him, but his kind of presence was there. I was reduced to, well, actually the Holy Spirit first, reduced to a heap of sobbing, uber repentance in the presence of the infinite holiness of God's presence. And Jesus was next to me, behind me a little bit, couldn't see him, couldn't touch him, wouldn't dare. And I experienced his incredible holiness. That's why.
When you say that, what do you mean?
You have any kids?
Yes, I have a son.
Okay. Now I'm going to bring something up, and may this never, ever, 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 ever happen to you. But 22 years ago, I lost my son. My wife and I, she gave birth, and he died in our arms. I heard his last heartbeat. May it never happen to you. I don't care if I hated your guts. I wouldn't want that on you. And but you probably could imagine the devastation upon your heart and the agony if something like that were to happen, which I would never want upon you. But you see what I'm saying so far?
Yes, sir.
All right. You can call me Matt. Matt's fine.
Okay.
And so I've done that. Carried the body of my son in a coffin to the gravesite. I've done this. So you can imagine. Okay. When I was on my knees that day receiving Christ, I got tricked into walking in front of a church. And I decided to give Jesus a chance. I was an agnostic at the time. I kind of got tricked into walking up. I won't get into all that. Give Jesus a try. I might as well be sincere. Might as well start praying, blah, blah, blah. I'm not suggestible. I don't follow the crowd. I just never was raised for that. Never done drugs. Didn't drink. No sleep deprivation. No medication. Nothing. Just all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit himself came. And within a split second, I instantly knew God was real. And the only thing I could do is keep my face to the ground and almost yell out my agonizing tears of sheer, incredible guilt, shame in the presence of holiness. And I wept harder that day than I've ever wept, including the day I buried my son. I wept so hard in the presence of being in the divine presence. All I could do is keep my face to the ground, and I was completely, permanently undone. Then Jesus, I'm skipping some stuff, but basically, then Jesus was next to me, behind me. I remember his attention. I remember what happened. I remember his concern. I remember being terrified, expectant, hopeful, afraid, waiting, all these mixture of feelings. But I very clearly remember his attention. I don't know how. I just know it was the attention of God himself, Christ upon me. He stepped into me. He stepped into my very being. And my sin left. And I was left in the presence of Jesus, forgiven. That's how I became a Christian.
May I ask, is there any way that you could possibly be mistaken about the identity of who?
No. If it happened to you,
why not?
Because I know.
How?
Because I know.
That's not an answer to how.
How I know?
Yes.
Does your wife love you?
Yes, she does.
How do you know?
She demonstrates that, but she also is an existing person.
And God is an existing person. He demonstrates to me on a regular basis.
That is true, but I can introduce you to my wife. Can you introduce me to God personally?
Yes, I can. If you want to have a Bible study, and we can talk about the person and work of Jesus Christ, God in flesh, who died on the cross and rose from the dead, and then you can trust in him.
Man, I don't mean a story about it. I mean, introduce me to God himself.
You want me to introduce you? All right.
I would love to.
God is a Trinity. He's the necessary precondition for intelligibility. What that means is he's the necessary being by which you can justify even arguing. He's the necessary being by which you can justify right and wrong. See, you're a man, and if someone were to come up and just punch your wife, which if I was there, I'd be all over that guy. You know, I don't believe in that. It's horrible. I'm not wishing any ill upon you. I'm just trying to give an illustration. But such an injustice would need to be dealt with, and rightfully so. And so hopefully, if I'm there with you, you know, it'll be a race to see who gets to that person first. Because we have a sense of justice within us. And when an injustice occurs, you know what an injustice is. So when someone robs somebody else and gets away with it, that's not just. But in an atheistic worldview, there is no justice or injustice. In an atheistic worldview, there is someone got robbed, got away with it, someone didn't get away with it. There is no moral right or wrong. There is no absolute by which you could say it is right or it is wrong. But yet you recognize justice and you recognize injustice. And you and I both, different people, standing 6 feet apart from each other, would then outside of ourselves say, yes, that was not right. And would you admit to me that someone who has committed an injustice ought to be dealt with? Someone who murders, someone who rapes, someone who steals, do you admit that they should be dealt with, should be punished? Do you admit that?
uh, I admit that yes, something should happen about the situation. You
Okay.
should not be allowed to go
Well,
around and harm other people. But
why
to
not?
why not?
Yeah, why not?
Because it isn't beneficial to yourself or the community that you deal with.
Wait a
You
minute. What if it's beneficial for me to rob from you in order to supply my family who has more
the,
children than you? That's beneficial.
is it beneficial to
You?
you and your is it beneficial to your reputation as the
I don't care
community?
about my
Because
reputation. It's all subjective.
you don't deal with just your family in your life though.
It's
You are
not. I don't care about
responsible
my.
to your community.
I don't care
Why?
about my community. I don't care about my reputation. I care about the
So you
survival of
would
my
be in the
family.
minority of people who also agree that an entire society is more than just what
Okay.
is centered on yourself.
So what you're
That's
offering is
that is
subjectivity.
I'm not offering subjectivity.
Yes, you are.
I'm offering
Trying to
the
show you something.
standard by which
It's a subjective standard. See, if you and I are standing there, and an illustration I give, if I've got a gun on you in your house, I'm going to rob you from your TV. You as an atheist, you can object. You can say, I don't like that. And I'll say, that's nice. You would not be able to say to me, that's morally wrong. I would chuckle. I'd laugh at you. Really? You're just a bag of protoplasm. You're just a person, a biological functioning structure. There's no moral right or wrong. They're just chemical reactions. You don't like this, but I can chuckle and say, you can't pull the it's morally right or wrong card on me.
may I ask why would it be morally right or wrong with a God present?
Because God is the standard of righteousness. He is
Why?
okay. He is the standard of righteousness because he is the creator of all things, and there is nothing greater than him. Since there's nothing greater than him to appeal to for any standard of right and wrong, he is that standard of right and wrong.
That assumes that God has been demonstrated.
Well, you see, you already believe God has been demonstrated. You just
Uh,
don't recognize it because you recognize injustice. And you've also said that someone ought to be punished. But you're saying that there's a moral ought that occurs that society as a whole itself ought to abide by.
no, that is not what
Yes.
I'm saying.
So
That is
society
not what I'm
shouldn't
saying at
punish the
all.
person who does something wrong?
We are accountable to each other as a community, as a society of
No, who
people.
says so?
The fact of the matter that we
No,
all
no,
live
no,
in
no.
this place and we all have to get along
Who
in a
says
certain
so?
way.
Who says we have to?
Anarchy, if we don't, says we have to.
Oh, so there's different forms of anarchy. And if I rob you in order to benefit my family, is that morally wrong?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to try and get this and paste this in and see if you believe in universal moral absolutes.
I do not.
Because I bet you do, and I'm going to show you, okay? I'm going to put a sentence in here. My website's moving kind of slowly, and I want to get it, and others will know what it is as soon as I can get my, I wonder if I'm getting a site, oh, I'll just do this. Here we go. Okay.
Are
I'm going to
you
put a
able?
sentence, I got it. I'm going to put a sentence in the text, and would you tell me if the sentence is true or if it's not true? You ready? It is always morally wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure. True or
Can you
false?
repeat that again?
It's in the text. You can read it. It is always morally wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure. This is a trap for you, okay? I'm just letting you know. If you
I see
answer
that.
yes, you're trapped. If you say no, you're trapped.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not trying to be mean to you. I'm just trying to get you to see
Can
something.
I decline to answer because I am not
You can
really
decline.
interested in
Oh, but you see, you said
games.
this is not a game. You said you don't believe in moral absolutes. The problem here is that you see the difficulty in the sentence. If you're to say yes, it's always wrong, then you're saying there's moral absolutes. If you say no, well, then what you're saying is there are instances when it's okay to torture babies to death merely for the personal pleasure. Either way, you're stuck, and your atheism is what has done this to you. Your atheism, which can't supply a moral standard, only a subjective one, means that when you come up to an issue like this, you can't deal with it. This is one of the failures of atheism philosophically.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Please. If the God of the Bible is your moral standard, and there are instances where he commands such things to happen.
Like what?
What you described, dashing babies on the rocks for their pleasure. Merely for their pleasure. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it never occurs in Scripture.
The Bible has all sorts of atrocity, commandment of the God of the Bible.
Well, wait a minute. There aren't any verses in the Bible that say torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure.
Please ask the question. I'm trying to ask a question. You're diverging from my main point. If the God of the Bible, which you believe in and you say is the arbiter of morality, of objective morality, if he commands such atrocities, if not exactly the one you are describing, something similar to it, which he does many times in the Bible, how is he the arbiter of all objective morality, especially a morality that goes against that action?
Hey, Matt, I just want to, before you answer, I think you guys are talking past each other. So, Amadeus, I don't think you heard what Matt first said. Okay, so where do we get morality from?
Where do we get morality from?
Yeah.
Morality, to me, is empathy and reasoning.
Okay.
Morality isn't a strict set of rules that is given. It isn't a straight and narrow black and white type of thing. This is why moral dilemmas exist. There isn't always a clear right and wrong to every single situation. Now, Matt is offering very easy, trappable gotcha situation.
No, he's not. No, he's not.
I believe he is. I believe he is because everybody, any human you ask, would hold the opinion. Okay.
Amadeus, here's the thing. Matt told you that where we get morality from is the nature of God. So the answer to your question is that there's nowhere in the Bible that God does these atrocities unless we make you the standard of morality and not God. So if you want to dialogue with Matt, you got to talk the same terminology, have the same definition. So there are no atrocities because the morality is defined by the nature of God, not you. That's, if you want to discuss that, then maybe that's where you have an issue. But you're talking past each other because you didn't hear what he very first said. And so I want to make the conversation go smoothly, so you guys are both talking the same language or talking at the same issue, not past each other. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry, Matt.
Okay. All right. You said you don't believe in moral absolutes. And when I give you a sentence, then you refuse to deal with the sentence. And the reason you did is because you see the difficulty that this truth or this idea poses within your worldview. What I'm trying to do is show you that your worldview is insufficient. So your response now is to tackle my worldview and to say that the God of Christianity is wrong. But you see, there's two problems. One, you need to cite a specific example and we'll look at it, but you haven't done that. You just said they're atrocities, so you're begging the question. You're just assuming something's wrong, but here's the problem. You don't have a standard by which you can say something is right or is wrong. You don't have an objective standard, I should say. You don't have a standard by which you can say this action is by nature and essence wrong. Just because people might agree that something is wrong doesn't make it so. Now, I'm assuming you're African American and slavery occurred here in this country, and the majority of people thought it was okay. It doesn't make it okay. The Jews were killed in Nazi Germany. A majority thought that it was okay. So what? It's called the argumentum ad populum. Just because the majority believes something doesn't make it so. And so to say that society believes this or society asserts that this is the moral standard, it's an irrelevant issue because it doesn't mean the society is right. It just means the majority vote wins. If in society in 200 years, for example, they decide, hey, we've learned in the past 200 years that atheism is detrimental to society. And it turned out that it was so detrimental that we now outlaw atheism, and if you hold to atheism, you need to be executed. Now, if 98% of society held to that position, well, then would it be right? If you're to say, no, it's not right, then you have to give us a standard. If you say no because it harms somebody, well, then why is harm the right standard? Just because people say it is? See, you have a problem. When you want to go to the Bible and try and undermine the Bible, now you have two problems. You see, I'm not going to argue about Islam, nor am I going to argue about Buddhism, because you and I both agree that those things are false. So what we're left with is atheism and Christianity. And that's the only thing I will defend is Christianity. We only have two positions to work from. I'm almost done here. This is just simple logic. We only have two areas to work from, atheism and Christianity. You can't negate both as explanatory issues. You can't say both Christianity and atheism, since there are the only two options on the table here, are now invalid. And we can't use morality in either one of them. That's shooting yourself in your moral feet, both of them. If you want to say that something in the Bible is incorrect, cite it. Let's talk about it. And let's see by which standard you would say it's morally right or wrong, because you don't have one.
I don't know.
How much of that? I don't know how much of that he heard. He actually.
Yeah, I was trying to tell you guys I really didn't hear
okay.
much of it. I didn't hear what he said.
He dropped.
And that was a lot to miss. I'm sorry. I do apologize.
It's okay. It happens. Here's basically the thing. You can complain about the God of the Bible and his actions, but your complaint is irrelevant because it's just your opinion. You don't have a way of determining whether something actually is right or actually is wrong. It's just your opinion.
And my response to that is basically, I don't think there is an objective right or wrong at all. I don't think there is. I don't think that's what morality is. Morality to me is the ability to reason and the ability to employ empathy, the ability to understand that your actions affect others and that there are consequences for their actions that come back to yourself. And it's not necessarily just doing things because they benefit me and my own. You have more to think about than just your own selfish benefits. And altruism is a part of our biochemistry. We are a social species by nature. So because of all of these different and complex aspects of how we treat each other and how we go about life, morality is something that you employ situationally as it comes along. You have to employ the best thing. You have to make the best decision based on your own ideas. It is my opinion. You are correct. I totally agree with you that it is my opinion. But I believe that you employing God as your standard of morality, so to speak, is your opinion. That is what you think morality should be, even though we can go into different, atrocities in the Bible, so to speak, that you yourself wouldn't agree with.
Well,
because you are just crediting this idea for your own subjective opinion about morality and how each other and what we ought to certain things. Because we are both human and because we are both from the same species and we have the same biochemical makeup, a lot of our moral good and bads are going to add up and match. There are things we will disagree on. If you believe in capital punishment, I'm not sure if you do, but that's something I disagree with. And a lot of people are very staunch about that and think that is the moral and right thing to do. It's all subjective. But for the most part, we agree. For the most part, we come together. That's what the society is, and that's what we are accountable to. And that is the standard of morality for an atheist. I don't need a God to give me a list of this is right and this is wrong, because that's not going to apply in every situation. The taking of life, for example, the taking of life in a situation where I am being attacked and I must take this person's life in order to save my own, I would consider that morally right.
But is it always right, or would it?
It is not.
Would it ever be all right to just let it go?
That would be a situational thing. That's my entire point. I can't personally think of a situation where if I am being attacked and not fighting back to save my own life wouldn't be the option to take. That doesn't make sense to allow somebody to just take my life, you know. But if there were a situation where that would apply, that's the point I'm making.
Let's take it differently. I mean, if somebody was hurting somebody that you loved, you could stop them. Would it ever be okay to not let it happen? I mean, excuse me, would it ever be okay to not stop it?
If I couldn't stop it, or if I could stop it?
No, if you just decided not to step in. Would it ever be okay?
I don't see a situation where.
And we can give you there's dozens of examples of situations where you would say that has to be the moral choice.
That's not what I would ever say, though. That's what I'm telling you explicitly right now.
We're giving you example of an object. What we mean by objective is no matter the time or the place, there's a definite moral or immoral act, no matter where, when, and how. Well, and you agree with that. You seem to agree with it, but you don't want to say it.
Let me tweak that. Let me tweak that a second there, too, because you might have misspoke. So, objective means it is a standard outside of yourself. Absolute means that it is everywhere, at all places, at all times. So I think what Tim meant to say was an absolute objective standard. Just wanted to clarify, sorry.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm sorry, Matt. I will be quiet.
I will say there are situations where most people who employ empathy will always make the same decision. I think that everyone's decisions will generally match on certain things, unless you are a sociopath or a psychopath who lacks empathy and cannot put yourself in the place of someone else and understand the harm or effect you have on someone else. I think this is what you are mistaking for an objective standard. The fact that everyone will agree to the gotcha questions that you are asking. Are we still there?
Yeah.
They're not gotcha questions.
I believe they are gotcha questions, because you will run into a sociopath. If I were a psychopath,
he's not asking you for a sociopath. He was asking you.
This is my answer to it. I know what he is asking me, so I would appreciate it if you could stop trying to clarify me and pigeonhole me into something, because this is my response to your question. This is the only response
Okay.
that I have to this question, because
I didn't
the
clarify you
objective.
once. I clarified Matt, and I clarified a misunderstanding you guys had. I clarified something Tim said. So if you're going to make accusations, try to get them correct. Thank you.
Can I jump in? Can I
Yes,
jump in?
please.
All
Yes,
right.
please.
Took some notes from what you said, Amadeus, and I'd like to tackle some of them, and then offer a challenge to you. But you said, well, there's my note. If there is no objective morality, as you assert, well then, and we could discuss this, then logically you have no right to condemn the God of Scripture, because all you would have is a subjective preference. And I'm not saying you don't have the right to your opinion. I would defend that right. But you don't have the moral right to assert that actions recorded in the Scriptures are actually right or wrong. It's just a subjective experience that you don't like. And this is a huge problem for you. And yet, what you've done is you've stated that one of the reasons you became an atheist because you look at the Scriptures and you've judged the things of Scripture, but you don't have a standard by which you can do that, a standard that you know is right. So you're being subjective and you're ultimately self-refuting, and you don't realize that. We could open that up if you want. You said altruism is a part of biochemistry. That's a huge problem for you. The reason it's a problem is because, and let me overly simplify something. If you have some containers of various chemicals, they're just various chemicals. Say there's 10 chemicals on a tabletop, and we have a battery with electricity. In the battery have wires, and we put wires together in these various chemicals. Is that going to produce more morality? Do the chemical reactions produce morality? And the answer is no, they don't. Of course they don't. Well, what if you have a million chemicals and a million wirings? That's biochemistry. How do they produce proper logical inference? How do they produce moral references? You said altruism is a part of a biochemistry. Well, the issue here is morality, because how do you get morals out of a chemical reaction? That's a huge problem. That's something you have to think about. You said my appeal to God is my moral opinion. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you. It is. But my appeal to God is not one that is resting internally. It's external. That we have a standard outside of ourselves. You shall not murder. It's wrong to lie. Don't commit adultery. These are the standards that are reflected by God and are recorded in the Bible. Now, you don't have to accept the Bible. You ought to, but you don't have to. And so my standard of morality is not based on my subjective opinion, because there are certain things that I wish weren't written in the Bible certain ways, but that has no bearing on whether or not they're true or not. So my appeal is to the Word of God, not to my subjective opinions. You said there are atrocities in the Bible that I would agree with are atrocities. Perhaps, perhaps not. It might depend on which one you would cite. But when you say, I would agree on it, well, you don't know. And you shouldn't impose upon me an opinion that you think I automatically will agree with. Now, I would say that there are certain atrocities in the Bible that are morally wrong, and those would be committed by the ungodly people doing very bad things. Of course, there are atrocities, but at least I have a standard by which I can say it's right or wrong. The gotcha question exists because there are such things as absolutes. If everything's subjective, then there are no gotcha questions. Now, that's something you should think about. You see, if everything is subjective, then truth is subjective. And the statement, it is always wrong to torture babies to death merely for one's personal pleasure, has no absolute value because it's just subjective. And how you perceive truth would be whatever you want it to be. So therefore, there wouldn't be any gotcha questions. But because you recognized it was a difficult question, which is why you wouldn't affirm or deny, you recognized it was. And the reason you did is because in order for it to be a gotcha question, there have to be moral absolutes. You recognize there are moral absolutes, which is why you wouldn't answer the question. You see? If you want to do one thing at a time, we can, but you said several things. That's why I just wanted to respond to these. I have them listed here.
Right. Maybe I should,
I can
be more
let me put
concise
these in.
and
Let me put these in, and if you want to tackle one of them at a time, please do. Let me put a one and stuff in front of them and stuff so that at least there's some order to the.
all right. This is, I guess, where I had a little trouble last time, so hopefully I don't get knocked out again trying to. I'm doing all of this from my phone, by the way, so.
Really? Yeah, you're doing pretty well.
Yes, sir.
Call me Matt, dude. It's all right. I mean,
I mean,
or great one, or great one. I try to get my wife to
Yeah.
but he hasn't bought into that one yet.
Matt, just assume that
so it's a force of habit.
Matt, just assume he can't read the text because.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, you can't read the text.
He's gonna get messed up with his phone trying to read it.
Okay, thank you for reminding me of that. Here's one, and this is really a huge problem for you, and you should recognize this, and it should undermine your whole reasoning against the scriptures on a moral basis, and this is it. If there is no objective morality, then you have no right to condemn the God of Scripture.
I wouldn't say I have a right. I don't have any right. Because if there is no objective morality, then there is no right.
If there's no right, there's no wrong. You can't say the Bible's right or wrong.
According to my personal standard, I can, and that is what I draw from. Man,
so
that is what
then what
my personal standard doesn't have to be yours.
No, what justifies your personal standard as being the right one?
It isn't, because there isn't
an objective
right. Nope, I'm not saying. I'm saying it's neither right nor wrong objectively.
Whoa! So now you're making moral statements that are neither right or wrong?
They are neither right or wrong objectively. They are right by my standard.
Well, wait a minute. When you say they're neither right nor wrong objectively, you're saying that there's something outside of yourself of which you're appealing about what is right and wrong.
No, I'm saying that there is no right or wrong objectively, period.
Okay. So you're making an absolute moral statement that there is no absolute right and wrong.
No, I'm making an absolute statement that there is no objective morality.
And how
I'm not saying that there are no. I'm not saying that there are no absolutes. Because 2 + 2 is absolutely 4. I'm not saying that there are no absolutes. What I am saying is that there is no objective right or wrong.
There's no objective right or wrong.
How do you know that? Your argument, the question that you are asking me, is contradicting itself.
No, it's not.
Because yes, it is. Because you're asking me that if there is no objective standard, then I don't have a right to do something, which you're still implying an objective standard about rights or wrongs. But the question is about whether or not there. The question is about there not being an objective standard at all. So if there is no objective standard, I can say whatever I please about how I feel the Bible presents itself. I have that based on my subjective standard, because there isn't a objective standard which for you to call out on to say I don't have a right to do.
How do you know there's no objective standard of morality?
You can't demonstrate.
Is it always wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure? I say yes, it is. It's always wrong. Universal truth.
And I'm with you. I would agree with you, but a sociopath wouldn't.
Okay, we're talking about you. And so you agree there's a universal moral truth now that's objective.
We are about me. Are talking to me, Matt. Matt, I need you to be fair. I need you to be fair with me, sir. I'm trying to control the situation, but I need you to be fair with me. I need you to be honest with me and if we're trying to come through here together, then I need you to be completely honest with that. That's what I'm being with you, and you are putting words in my mouth, and I'm explicitly what I'm. So
what I'm doing is showing.
It's not about me. It's not about me. My example and my counter to your argument is that a sociopath would disagree with you based on his lack of empathy. So there is they're not being a moral objective.
Hold on. Would the sociopath be right or wrong?
There isn't an objective standard.
The only thing I'm trying to hold on
no right
is when you talk real quick on your phone there, you're breaking up. So you got to slow down and not raise your voice too much. That's all. You're breaking up and you're not being heard.
All right.
Take a deep breath. Breathe in. Breathe out.
You said
I'm fine, sir. Thank you.
Let me kind of reiterate. You said it. You agreed. You said it's always wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure. So you agreed there's a universal
my standard. According to my standard,
So
I
your
agree
standard
with your
is
objective standard. Yes, sir.
yours, but
This is what I'm saying.
what you're saying is your standard is that there is a moral absolute that everyone ought to obey.
No, that is not what I said.
Yes, it
That
is.
is that is a lie, sir. You are lying at this point.
Okay.
It's a lie
First
because
of all,
I'm very clear
first
with
of
what
all,
I'm saying.
first of all, I'm not lying. And second of all, what I'm doing is showing you what your thinking and what your logic leads to. You agreed with this statement. It is always morally wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure. You said that's true. Now, what you're
I
saying there
said
is,
that according to my standard. And
yes,
if you continue to misrepresent me, then I think I found the end of conversation.
according to your standard, you believe it's always wrong for everyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure, right?
My standard,
Yeah.
yes.
According to your
Me.
personal standard, you believe it's always wrong for everyone to do this.
No. According to my standard, but my standard is not objective for all people.
But according to your standard, you're saying it's always wrong for anyone to do this. That's what you believe.
But my standard isn't objective for all.
Okay, I
So
understand that. Your standard isn't objective for
we're
all.
talking in circles.
No, we're not.
This is unproductive. We are
No, we're
talking in
not.
circles.
Let me finish.
You
We're
keep
not talking.
reiterating a point that is irrelevant because my standard is not objective for all.
Folks, let me do this with him, okay? I have to do this numerous times with you to get you to see something. This is often the case. I know it's frustrating, but you said the statement is true. That means in your personal view, everyone ought not to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure. That's your opinion, that everyone ought not do that. Your opinion is
It would be very harmful to the baby to do so. Yes, if I were in the power to stop everyone from doing it, I personally would.
so you're saying that there's a moral standard everyone ought to obey.
No, I am
Yes, you
not.
do. Let's go over it again. Your opinion is,
Oh,
your personal opinion is that it's always wrong for everyone to do this. If it's always wrong for everyone to do it, then they ought not do it, correct?
who am I to tell them?
Is it not true that if everyone ought not do it, then they shouldn't do it? If you say it's wrong for everyone, then they shouldn't do it, correct?
I'm sorry. I have to say something because
He's stuck.
to
I'm not stuck.
Yes,
you
you
My
just said
answer has been
brother,
given several times.
hey, listen. You just said that who am I to tell them they're wrong? Who are you to tell them that it's wrong to hurt someone for the sake of hurting them? You just said that, which is a complete contradiction to what you actually believe.
Okay, let me bail you out a little bit, Amadeus, okay?
Okay,
Well,
whatever that means.
no, what I want to do is just, this may sound odd, but I just want to love on you. See, what I'm trying to do is to show you, and I don't mean to be malicious about it. Please understand, I'm not trying to beat you up intellectually, then trot upon your intellectual carcass. I'm not trying to do that. The only thing I'm trying to do is to show you that, and I mean this respectfully, and I do, that you're not thinking through the issue sufficiently. And I'm not calling you stupid. I'm not at all. You just not
I
really
don't
thought.
think you are.
Okay, thanks. Because I'm
Mhm.
not intending to. If it comes across, just let me know. I'm not intending to. And sometimes it come across that way, and I don't. But at any rate, and that you've not thought these through, and it's the thinking. Dare I say, it's your improper thinking so far that you've been using is the same thinking you've used to deny God. And you ought to be quite careful about saying God doesn't exist because, and let me put words in your mouth at this point, because he doesn't behave the way you like him to behave. Okay, and I'm rephrasing it, but you see what I'm saying? What you're doing is you're judging God because he doesn't agree with your personal opinion about how things ought to be. And well, then I could point a finger at you and frown and say, well, who are you to say that? Who are you to judge God? Then you say, well, I have a personal opinion. well, your personal opinion, no disrespect meant, doesn't carry any weight in the actuality of truth. It's just your personal opinion, and that means it's subjective. If it's subjective, it's based on your experience, based on your preferences, but that has no bearing on truth. So therefore, your whole reasoning is self-refuting. You're stuck. And so what I'm trying to do is pastorally just try and get you to the point to see that you're not doing this well, not doing it properly, and that you're making judgments out of a way that you can't make judgments, you can't justify it. And yet, at the same time, you recognize justice, you recognize this, because it's just in you, though you can't explain it. Biochemistry doesn't work. You recognize it. I would say you recognize it because you know God really exists in your heart of hearts, yet you're just denying him in your unrighteousness. Okay, I'm done with my sermon. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So Amadeus, you had said if you were in control.
I'm going to go get water. I'll be away from the camera, but I'm still listening.
Okay. You said that if you were in control of things, that you would make all people not rape children just or babies just merely for personal pleasure, correct?
If I can't, I would stop the action. That's what I meant by that.
Okay. So if you
I would
if you
stop
could,
it from happening. That does not suddenly make
okay.
that an objective. That would just mean that I would take action if I could, and I knew about the situation and I had the power to do so.
Okay. So what makes you the standard that others should have to live by?
That's my claim. So that's an invalid question.
So with your standard, how could you define what a sociopath even is? Because that would require some standard outside of yourself that's universal.
That would be a question for a psychologist, not myself.
So you keep appealing to something called a sociopath to try to argue that there's always a way out for you, and yet the sociopath in your worldview can't even exist. Or you're at least saying you can't answer it. So the sociopath in your argument is a non-issue, correct?
No, it isn't. Because
okay, then how do we have a sociopath? Then you first need to answer how we can have a sociopath in your worldview.
What do you mean? A sociopath is a person who displays certain behavior aspects, who does not.
By what standard?
By
Remember,
a
you
standard
said the
of
standard is yourself.
No, not. It isn't.
You're appealing
It's
to
a
an
standard.
objective standard against about what a sociopath is, not a subjective one.
We can look this up. We can.
Yes, but you're missing the point, and this is the thing. I'm trying a different way to try to point this out to you. You're appealing to an objective, absolute standard. When you look it up, that's going to be a standard, right? Correct.
It is going to be a standard based on science. We have sociopaths.
It's going to be based on a conclusion that people make in consensus. If enough sociopaths make the rules, then they're not going to define it the same way, will they?
Are you serious?
Will
this
they?
is the most ridiculous thing I've ever been part of.
That's a nice dodge, but it doesn't answer the question, does it?
No, it's not. It's not a dodge. This is just silly. This is really silly.
Okay.
It really is. We define sociopaths and psychopaths according to standards in psychology. We have people who study these types of things. This is what I am talking about.
But you're missing the main point.
You're throwing.
Here's the main point.
Have an actual point.
Here's the point. The point is that we can do that because we have an objective, absolute standard. Once you remove that, you can't define. You can't define a sociopath. Okay, but we're trying.
It makes no sense. That makes no sense at all.
Amadeus,
everything you just said makes
Amadeus,
no sense.
Maybe
You're
it would
not
make more
making
sense.
Any sense.
Maybe it would make more sense if you stopped trying to talk over me, listening. Might be just an idea. Okay.
All right.
Because this is what I saw you doing with Matt as well. You're talking over him, but I'm trying to get you to see that when you go to that psychology text that you're going to look at to find that standard is appealing to the fact that there has to be something that's absolute universal. Okay, and it has to be objective. Okay,
Again,
is the definition of a sociopath something that we should all accept everywhere?
you don't have to accept. You don't want to accept.
That's not the
You
question.
clearly aren't. You clearly aren't accepting that I'm not
No,
explaining.
no. I'm not. You're missing what I'm not disputing what the definition of a sociopath.
No. When I'm just trying to take control of this because you are trying to play with me.
No, I'm not.
And you, sir, you specifically, not Matt so much,
Okay.
but you specifically, you're being dishonest and you're being shady in the way you
Okay, so you
structure
just
your questions.
okay. Let me be really clear. You accused
and-
Matt of lying. Now you're accusing me
No.
of dishonesty.
I'm accusing you of dishonesty because of the way you are.
Define what I said that's dishonest right now.
I'll be right back with this. Okay.
Firstly, that I am implying that there are no absolutes. I told you earlier.
Okay.
I told you.
So let's. You're going to need to go back.
My only
Here's the thing.
objection is
You accused me of dishonesty, and what you just did was dishonest.
Okay.
I said that you're going
All
to
right.
appeal to a
Then I
standard
appreciate
that's based
the-
in absolutes.
my-
So now, if you're going to
I mean,
accuse
I
people of being
guess-
dishonest, you should do
I'm
so.
going to go ahead and go now. I appreciate you having me here. It was wonderful.
Well, here's the thing.
Hey, I just saw something.
I wish you luck in your future.
Hey,
I
Amadeus.
wish you luck in your yes, sir.
Sorry, I know you want to go. I just looked at your picture thing. Am I right in that you have the word evil underneath it?
Yes, I do. It is a joke.
So
It's a joke. How did I-
here's the thing that I was
Yes.
trying to say, and I understand
But
that.
I don't
you-
wish to speak to you, sir. So that's why
Okay.
I'm leaving. So thank you again.
Is that because you can't
I
answer the
appreciate
question?
conversation. No, it isn't because it's
Okay.
It's because I don't really like the way
It's
you
because I
structure your
called you out on
questions.
your dishonesty.
No, it isn't actually.
It absolutely
It's because
is.
I don't
That's why
like the
you're
way
running.
that you structure your
I won't let
question.
you get away with
And
lying
because no,
on the show.
I'm not lying,
And
sir.
it's provable.
Sir, you just tried to tell me. You just tried to tell me that I'm implying that there are no absolutes at all.
That is not what I'm saying. Now you accused Matt of
That
doing
is
the
exactly
very
what
same-
you said.
I know that is
what you
exactly
said. And
not
I don't
what
want
I
to sit
said.
here. Well, okay.
And
well,
that's
I don't
why I
want to
told
sit here
you
and go
you
back
can go
and forth
back
with
and
this.
re-listen.
And
and
there's
when you
no
hear me
there's no
say-
productive thing.
What
There's no
you'll-
productive. There is no productive outcome to this conversation. So thank you again for having
I
me.
understand that's your confirmation bias at work, but the productive part of it. Oh, and there he goes. So, I mean, the thing there is, I think Matt, you saw, he said he wanted to be God. Basically, he wants to be the standard. What he got upset with is I think you pointed out he is appealing to an absolute.
Yeah, I was trying to show that. Yep. And he's getting frustrated because, in his atheistic perspective, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Some Alex Posner, he says I believe the wording of the moral question is a bit unfair.
So
Okay.
let's add
How's
him
it
to
unfair?
the podcast.
Yeah.
Let's add him.
How's it unfair? I'll take
And one
that.
of the things, just Matt, real quick to wrap up before while we're adding Alex, is that, here was the thing that you saw twice. He attacked you, called you, said that you were lying.
Mm-hmm.
You pointed out that you were not lying. He then, and this is something he did with both of us when he started having trouble in the argument. He wants to appeal that they're sociopaths, but once you remove a standard, you remove the way to define what a sociopath is. If a sociopath is defined, they have to be defined based on something we're going to call normal. And normal means that there has to be some standard to define that. And that standard can't be self, it can't be subjective, it has to be objective, and it has to be universal. I never once said that he was, I mean, the irony is he was accusing me of what you were saying to him, and then saying that I was the one saying it, not you. I told him he was appealing to, or that the psychologists he's going to appeal to are appealing to an absolute moral standard, or an absolute objective standard. And that's the thing. So I hope he does listen. I hope he goes back and rehears, and he'll see that I was saying that the psychiatrists.
And I want to thank him for coming on. He's one of the few atheists who have talked to me on Twitter, and then been and then showed up. So good on him for showing up. Bad on Andrew for chasing him away. I apologize for Andrew's behavior. And
well, okay, I'll just say this: I am not
needed.
I am not going to allow someone, and Matt was doing much better with that, but I'm just not going to let someone say, "Oh, you're being dishonest," and then get away with that when they're being dishonest and just projecting onto us.
Well, let me ask you guys a question, Matt and Andrew. He said time and time again that absolutes do exist. So should we have asked him for an example of that?
Well, we could have, but I was trying to take the conversation into more into the area of undermining his logic base, so that his thinking processes can be undermined, or I wanted to undermine his confidence in his own thinking ability. And that's not a malicious attempt. It was to show him that the rationale that he has to object about God is not based in cogent thought. Therefore, he ought to reconsider. That was the goal I was trying to get to.
And I think the best part of it, Matt, was when you said to him, I mean, if he's setting himself up the standard, it's just that he doesn't like God because God doesn't conform to his standard. And at one point he even said, his standard shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Who's he? Well, that's the question. Who's he to create a standard? What he's doing is saying he should be the standard of morality. And then, as you pointed out, he wants to compare God to him as the standard.
Right. That's what I was.
And you said that, and I thought, this is the thing. It's like you said it and said it should be a concern for him.
I think that the easiest thing to catch from him was when he said, "Who am I to tell someone that they're wrong?" And I can tell you that he spent 3 hours on Periscope today proclaiming that God is wrong, that any concept of God being moral is wrong. So hopefully he'll see his inconsistency and can consider. But okay, let's go to Alex. Alex, I recognize you. I think you've been here before. I turned your microphone up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I have been, and I've actually been watching the show ever since, pretty much every week. So to address the question and why I believe it's a little bit unfair to add the for fun part, when you look at the issue, right, is it morally wrong to torture babies for fun? By adding for fun, it makes it almost by default immoral, right? Because there could be a situation where someone, essentially, and I could give you a personal example with myself. As a child, I was deathly afraid of dentists. Every time my parents would take me to the dentist, I would get into a state where I was extremely stressed, to the point where I would even throw up getting out of the car at the dentist. So I was in a lot of what I would call torturous state.
Distress.
Distress, yes. But the fact that I was in that state, and let's just for the sake of argument, let's assume I had a heart condition, which I don't. This is a hypothetical, and my parents took me to the dentist, and let's say the dentist did some sort of procedure on me, and due to my heart condition, which let's say was undiagnosed, I died. You could technically say that I died from torture, and you could also say that the dentist, liking his profession, enjoyed doing that work, enjoyed doing what he did to me. So in a way, you could have a situation where, due to the circumstances, it may not necessarily be immoral.
Well, let me help you out a little bit and illustrate something. If you and I were in a room discussing this, and then I just slap you real hard upside the face, is it morally right or is it morally wrong? Well, it depends. If I don't like what you just said and I don't like your shirt color and I do that, that's wrong. But what if there was and you didn't know it, there was just a humongous, really venomous wasp on your cheek, and that's why I slapped you. Oh, then it's okay. I mean, sorry to hurt you, but the intention was to save you. Motives are what makes something moral. Motives, it's an issue of morality. So if you look at my cell phone here, that's not a moral thing. Nothing in this office is moral. Books, cameras, chairs, it's not moral. But the issue of action is moral. And so this is why merely for one's personal pleasure is an issue of attitude and reason, motive. Hence, it has moral value.
Correct. But, okay, you look at it this way too. If the purpose of the person acting or doing this moral action, if his purpose was merely to have fun, would that be his only option? And could there have not have been other options for him to have fun and for them not to be moral?
We're not, okay, since I'm the one who invented this, I'm just telling you that's all it is. It's just a statement meant to show the problems that exist inside of an ethical system where there is no absolute. And it's meant for that purpose. It is a trap question. And I used it in a debate with Dan Barker about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago in Portland, Oregon, where he had stated, and he and I were debating, can you be good without God? And he had stated in books and lectures that he could find an exemption, or an exception, I should say, to any moral absolute that anybody could give. So I thought that was an interesting thing, and I knew he'd bring this kind of a thing up in our debate, or I suspected he would. So I had to think of something. Is there something that is absolute? I came up with this sentence. This is my invention. Is it always, the statement, it is always wrong, morally wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure. And I have this thing constructed a certain way. It's always morally wrong. There's no cases where it isn't morally wrong for anyone. Therefore, it's all people. And the reason is merely for their personal pleasure. Now, it is a difficult thing. When I asked him if he could find an exception to that, he could not.
Would you consider my example as an exception to that?
No, because it's merely for one's personal pleasure.
But it's also what he knew at the time, right? He was, he knew that for me it was very distressful, and he knew that in a way it is.
Yeah, but see, we're not talking about it. There's too many variables in this with your dentist as a child thing, which I can relate to, but there are too many variables. You need to focus on this sentence. Because, see, statements are either true or false. If you look in the phone, I'm holding this phone in my left hand. It's a true statement. And now, I got both my hands up, nothing's in. I say, I'm holding a phone in my left hand. It's not true. Well, statements are true or false. It's either true or it's not the case that it's true, that it's always morally wrong. Now, here's the thing. When you talk about morality, how can something be true morally? If you're an atheist, right?
Yes.
Okay. And let me overrepresent or overly simplify just to make the point. If I misrepresent you, please let me know. But just to make the point is that from your atheist perspective, you are a bag of biochemicals in the brain with certain harder structures down below that motivate you or that move you around so you can feed your brain and your body and things like that. Chemical reactions don't produce proper moral or objective moral standards or moral absolutes. They're just chemical reactions. From your atheistic perspective, if you were to assume your naturalism, your materialism, and you were to deny the existence of an objective moral standard outside of yourself, and if you were to say that the universe is all there is, and the physical laws of the universe are all there is, and your brain operates underneath those, then you have absolutely no way of justifying, even if your argumentation with me is proper or logical or true. Because even your argumentation with me could just be nothing more than, excuse me, sorry, my sound waves hitting your ears, causing a certain chemical reaction in your brain, and a very sophisticated action occurs, and then you respond with a certain attempt to be logical. It doesn't mean you are or are not logical. But to find out if you are logical, you couldn't appeal to your own brain because your own brain doesn't produce it. You have to appeal to something outside of yourself. So, which means that your whole system of thought is undermined when you assume just the naturalistic principles in the universe. In order for you to have rational thought, you have to assume there's something other than that in order to have rational thought. Likewise with morality, you have to assume there's something outside of yourself in order to have an objective standard by which you can make moral statements. When you discuss this issue of the statement, it is always wrong for anyone to torture babies, that's merely for personal pleasure, you recognize the difficulty that this statement displays in your atheism. And you're trying to find a way to make the statement not true. But what then you're ultimately arguing is that there are cases where it's morally acceptable to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure. You see, there's no way out for you as an atheist.
I look at it this way. I look at it as you have actions that are morally good.
How do you know?
Because they're relative to other actions, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So let me explain where I'm going with this.
Okay.
So you have actions that are morally considered good, actions that are neutral, they have no moral weight to them, let's say, and actions that are considered morally bad or evil actions. And you know them based on how they relate to any other actions that you could perform in any given situation. So for example, with the baby torture example, right? If you say that you your goal is to have fun, and if you use a baby fun, that is an action that results in a moral in an evil action or a immoral action. Whereas if you, for example, your goal was to also have fun, and as I enjoy playing with my son, playing with a baby or a small child provides me with pleasure, that is a good action. That is a good moral action. So you can contrast and compare by what options you have, what you choose to do, and what are the consequences of your actions.
Okay. Get that?
What's that? Sorry, I didn't catch the last.
I respond to that.
Oh, okay.
You said an action is morally good based on how it makes you feel.
No, how it compares with other actions.
No, you did say what you just said here. I wrote it down. Maybe not exactly, but you just said it. And before I said, can I respond?
Oh, no.
So maybe you did. But I'm not trying to catch you. It's just you said that. If you want to retract it or say, I don't really mean it that way, that's fair. We all kind of do that. But you did say actions are morally good or bad in relation to other actions. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. How do you know that statement is true?
How do I know that it's true?
You just gave me a moral statement. How do you know your moral statement is true? And
because, okay, yes,
is it true for everyone?
Okay, because there are objective. Sorry, let me back up for a second. Harming someone produces a negative effect. And if your goal is to not produce negative effects either to yourself or others, then it is objectively good to help someone instead of harming them. And you can objectively see that when you cause harm versus when you help someone, right? You can tell the difference.
Yeah, there's problems with that.
Okay. What are the problems? No,
I'll tell you what, harm as a standard of morality. Let me find a link.
So I don't mean it as a standard of morality. I mean harm as the goal of what you're
No.
trying to achieve.
Yeah, what I mean is that's the article title. And if you look,
And increase well-being. That is the goal.
okay, if you're to look in the text, I have a link,
Okay.
and there are 33 statements there. There could be more, could be less, but if you as an atheist say that what is morally good is what reduces overall harm, then on what basis do you validate that assertion as being a proper moral standard? First question. Listen to another question here. I'm going to read a few questions here. If you say that reducing harm is a valid standard because that is what people want, then how are you not committing the logical fallacy of begging the question by saying that what people want is what makes something morally right? Third question. If you say that reducing harm is a valid standard of morality because it is what people want, then how are you not promoting an arbitrary standard since it is based on people's feelings and desires, which change? Here's another one.
But
If reducing, see, I could go on. I shouldn't, but I can go on, and these are questions
though.
you can't answer.
Sorry, you were cutting in and out. I didn't hear the last part
Okay.
there.
I was going to say that, if you want, you could try and answer these questions, send me the answers. But as an atheist, you can't demonstrate that any answers you give are the right answers.
But morality, I don't believe, has necessarily right answers, or at least answers that we know to be right.
You said actions are morally good or bad in relation to each other, to other actions, excuse me. That is a moral statement. That's how you're defining morality. You're giving an
Correct.
absolute moral.
Yes, but I'm looking at it from a societal point of view. I don't look at it from an individual point of view, right? So
Okay, but
so what I mean by that is if, let's say,
that
as a
doesn't
society
work.
we agree that killing people is harmful because you don't want to live in a society where you could be killed at any moment, right?
What we
I mean,
want doesn't make it right or wrong.
correct.
So that's not a good argument. We don't want to live in a society where that happens. I may not want to, but that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means I don't want to.
Okay. So there are, or there were, I guess, places where people were sent. For example, Australia was a penal colony where people were sent because people just wanted to get rid of criminals, right? They didn't want them in their society. They sent them there, and uh, that was, I guess, a way for them to get rid of people they didn't want in their society. So that's what I mean by that is a society as a whole decides what's best for it, and that's what they kind of use as the guidelines for their judicial system, right?
You're way off base here. And I think what you're doing is trying to justify an objective standard that you can't justify. Instead of focusing at the issue, you're having a problem. And what you're doing is you're trying to say society over here, and this happened over there historically. The issue is this, that there is a universal moral truth. You don't have any way as an atheist to justify that. But yet you do make moral absolute statements. You yourself said that, if I can quote you here, actions are morally good or bad in relation to other actions. Well, I asked you how you can justify that as being true. You're not able to, or you haven't. Let me say you haven't so far. But what you've done is you've made a moral absolute statement. Actions are morally good or bad in relation to other actions. That's a moral statement because it deals with morality, and you're saying it's an absolute. How do you have
Can I
an
try to
absolute?
explain that?
Sure.
So let me try an analogy. Let's say a game of and actually this analogy comes from Matt Dillahunty. So I don't know if you've heard it before or not, because I know you guys have talked with each other before. But I think it's a good analogy. Essentially, what he says is, imagine a game of chess. At any given situation, there is a finite number of moves that you can make. Some will result in you being better off. Some moves will result in you being worse off. Some may not necessarily have an impact right now. They may have an impact later on. But the point I think that he was trying to make, and what I'm trying to make also, is that um, given a situation, you may not know what all your options are, but you know what would result in, at least at the time that you're making that decision, will result in something that will either put you and others to be better off. And you contrast that with actions that you may do that will either result in you or someone else being worse off. And that's how you compare um, situations or moral dilemmas and try to come up with the best, or at least if that's your goal, if your goal is to be a moral good person, you would obviously try to do actions that are morally correct and right.
Right. There's a problem with his analogy in this issue of morality. Perhaps this is why he won't face me in a real public debate, because he's refused to. But if this is the kind of thinking that he's proposing, there's problems.
Mind
Again,
you, I
with
may
chess,
have completely butchered his analogy, so
well, perhaps.
yeah, that could also be the
And,
case.
and if I'm attacking, your representation, which is not accurate, oh well. But let's just talk about what you said, though, okay?
Okay.
And at any time in a game of chess, there's a finite number of moves you can make. Some result in better positioning, others not so much. And you say, well, it's better off according to what? It's better off according to the design of the game, the end game. It's in relationship to the thing that has been assumed. Chess is defined by the end game in this context that we're talking about. So what you're doing is you're trying to define what is good by the end game. In other words, you're assuming the goal is the right goal. Then you're defining good by the goal. But you haven't just been able to tell us that the goal itself is the right goal. You're saying it's good because that's what we want it to be down there. So why is it good? Because we say it's good. And it's a circular begging the question problem. This is why it doesn't work.
But would you not say that a better off society, or a society that prospers, is a better end goal, for example, than a society that fails due to the fact that
So
just kill each
I
other
understand.
or lie? Or,
But if, let's say that that there's a society where 25% of the population are owned as property, enslaved, and beaten, and because of it, the majority of the society prospers very well, then by your definition, that would be a good society. The prosperity of the society.
But well, there's more to it than that. I mean, obviously, I can.
Exactly.
I'll try to write it down.
That's why prosperity of a society is subjective. What governs what is truly prosper in a moral sense? Just because one country has a bunch of money and can fly to the moon doesn't mean it's morally right when it's killing babies and stuff like that. Doesn't mean it's morally right. Just because prosperity occurs doesn't mean it's morally right. So you're still stuck.
Well, there's the whole veil of ignorance idea as well, where the goals are set, not knowing whether or not you're going to be the rich country, the poor country, the slave owner.
I understand. But what we're talking here about is about moral absolutes. And what you've done is made a moral absolute. But you can't justify your moral absolute as being the right one when you said actions are morally good or bad in relation to other actions. This is your problem. Let me be a little bit more forceful with you. And I mean this politely. But when you make such a statement, you can't validate rationally that the statement is true. You don't have a moral standard by which you can assert that it is true. You're just assuming it's true and then arguing from it as being true. If you're an atheist, you can't do that and justify it rationally because your biochemical reactions in your brain don't produce proper logical inference nor proper objective moral standards. You're just reacting to chemical reactions, and there's no way to justify those things as being right or wrong. So your whole system is ultimately self-refuting. In order for you to argue against my position, you have to step on my foundation, God, and you have to pick out of the air, so to speak, moral absolutes. Then jump back over to your area and say, I'm going to throw these moral absolutes at you. And this is why you're wrong, Matt. But you don't realize that what you're doing is borrowing from my perspective in order to argue, in order to offer anything.
I don't believe I've done that because, like I said...
Well, it's true because I said so.
Okay.
That's a bit of a joke, you see. It's a little subjective.
I know, but
it's subjective. I just assumed the goal is the right one because I said so. If I'm going to do the same thing you're doing, there's a problem.
But that's what I'm saying. If you look at it from a individual point of view, then yes, we can go back and forth. You said whatever you said, I may say the opposite, and we're never going to get anywhere. But if it's almost like a self-correcting system where, as a society, right? And I know I'm overusing that term or word, but as a society, it's if certain things are accepted and viewed as beneficial to the society, right? Then
But it's circular. It's just begging the question: what's beneficial? What they say is beneficial, but what's beneficial can change in 100 years.
right. It's almost like I'm going to use another term that you may not like necessarily, but it's almost like evolution. I believe that societies evolved to become better at morals, and the fact that 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years, or however, even 500 years ago, people were just killing each other for things that today we have rules and societal contracts, for lack of a better term, for. Like, there's no more torture, for example, of prisoners, or at least there's laws against it, right? So we do evolve, whereas 500 years ago that was accepted and that was the norm. So as a society, we do evolve to improve our morals and make them better as we see them being better as a society, not as individuals. You know what I mean?
Well, we're going in circles at this point, and
Fair enough. So what I'll do is I'll send you an email with the response to the link you gave me. And
sure, yeah, try and answer them. I think in several years, only one atheist has tried to answer, and basically, I'm not saying you would do this, but basically he just called me names.
Okay, no, I'm not gonna do that. And sometimes for me too, writing stuff down and actually rereading it back and then going over it through a few iterations might make a little bit more sense than trying to talk to you live, right? Because right now there's a lot of thoughts going through my head and I can't quite put them.
All right, that's no problem. I do this more than you, so I'm a little more practiced at it, so no problem.
Right. Okay, fair enough. So I'll let someone
else. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Not to just get on Alex or to say something after he's gone. I don't mean beat him up, but it just bugs me when they assert that the goal is prosperity. Who says the goal is prosperity? Why? I mean,
that's what people want.
Well, there's a whole group of people who want to end the human race because we are a leech upon the earth.
Yeah.
And so they can't just assert there's no standard. I mean, it just bugs me. But who's next? We got somebody lined up.
Ocean has been waiting patiently, and I think he's back now.
Oops, I just booted him.
Yeah, it would be a continuation. He, I guess, disagreed a little bit with the way Alex was presenting the argument.
Okay, I edited him. Mr. Ocean, you've been here before.
I have. I was the polytheist that showed up that one time.
Yeah,
a few weeks
I
ago.
don't have fond memories of your name. I knew there was a reason. Okay.
Anywho, yeah, my disagreement with how the previous people were kind of defending this was I actually like the question that you're putting forward, the sentence. I think it's a good question or a good sentence or a good example to kind of combat with, because it's necessary to address if somebody's going to be trying to hold.
And can I just so I know, you said you're polytheist or you're an atheist or what? What was
I'm
it?
polytheist.
Polytheist.
Multiple gods, yes. So, yeah. That's the reaction I usually get.
Well, yeah, but I'm intrigued. I mean, on one hand, I'm glad you're a polytheist, so I can question you. But on the other hand, I don't want to be glad because you're a polytheist, because that means you're lost. So I'm kind of torn.
I know.
I
you
think
monotheists are more lost than us, though. All right.
Okay.
Anyway, we can get into that in a little bit if you want to. I just want to quickly kind of address this then, because I'm a moral non-realist. So my response to the question, go ahead and ask the question just so I can So it's I can
Or the
not
statement.
comment it at all, or the statement.
Yeah, let me see if I can put it in there again. Hold on a sec. There we go. Well, come on, here it is. In fact, I'll put the article link in there too. You can go
Sure.
through because there's variations on that statement, believe it or not. I have a grid at the bottom. For example, it's always morally wrong for
There's a
anyone to
grid,
murder.
right?
Yeah, there's variations, you know. But anyway, the main one I use is this one, and
Okay.
right here, okay? It is always wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure.
Okay. And my statement would be, as a moral non-realist, that the statement is malformed essentially because you're
Logically
saying morally.
malformed?
Well, you're saying morally wrong. So that is not matching up with what my position would be.
Okay, well, I'm curious. You say it's malformed. In what sense is it malformed?
Because it assumes morality in my position. My contention is that morality is not a thing.
So it assumes morality. Okay.
Right. Because it says, is it
Okay.
always morally wrong?
Yeah. So it's not even a valid question because there is no morality.
Right.
Okay. So then you're assuming there is no morality.
I provisionally hold that position.
Okay.
Now, that's where we get
you would have no problem with someone torturing a baby to death merely for their personal pleasure.
I do.
Why?
Well, it goes against my personal beliefs. I do have an ethical structure that I adhere to, and that has to do.
You do?
Right.
But you're a moral non-realist.
A moral
So-
non-realist, not an ethical non-realist.
Yeah.
There's a subtle difference.
Okay.
So, like, you can build a system of ethics that is based on what you personally value.
Yeah, you can.
And
do
from that perspective, you can have kind of a subjective morality if you really want to get into it. But
Okay.
it's based on my perspective. So the idea is that there isn't if my system of ethics can be built purely based on my perspective, that's all there is to me. There's no objective standard outside of me, which is what
How do
Andrew
you
was
know?
talking about earlier.
How do you know there are no moral truths, objective moral truths?
It's a position that I hold provisionally because it hasn't been demonstrated to me otherwise.
Okay.
Now, if it's
So-
demonstrated to me otherwise, then I'll change my position.
Okay.
But so far, it has not.
I'd have to back up
Sure.
because I would back up to a different topic to come back into this because there's a foundational topic that we're assuming is the case in
Mhm.
order to have this discussion.
Right.
Because what we're doing is assuming the laws of logic in order to have a discussion.
Or we're assuming morality. We're not necessarily assuming the laws of logic here. Well, we are, but I don't disagree with
Yeah.
you on that. We
yeah,
can.
we are assuming those laws.
Right. But
And I
we're
can
assuming
show you-
moral law.
I can show you that your polytheism doesn't work when we assume the laws of logic.
Honestly, my polytheism isn't figuring into this. But
But I'm trying to show you that by that, if your polytheism is there, and you have different gods, you can't have a single source of the laws of logic, which would mean your polytheism is false. And if your polytheism is false, then it would
we got
imply
into this last time.
then it would imply that there's a single being who is God. And if there's a single being who is God, then it would imply an absolute moral standard. Then your moral non-realism would be falsified.
There's no system of polytheism that assumes more than one author of the laws of logic.
Are all the beings?
That would be a straw man.
No, it's
so-
not. I've thought this through.
Well, I know you may have thought it through, but you've thought it through with wrong information. There's no polytheist that assumes that the laws of logic are a collective creation.
I didn't say that there were. I'm just saying that it's a problem. See, this really is an important issue.
Okay.
If you have, I don't know how many gods you believe in. How
Several.
many do you? Okay, let's just say.
I don't cap it. So
Okay, can I just say 10? Is this a representative number? Not
you can say 10, 100, 300. Doesn't matter.
okay,
We'll just- I just say there are multiple gods. Multiple
Okay.
is pretty much where I stop.
Are these multiple gods equal in their scope, their ability, or are they different?
They would be different.
Okay. Is there a
Yeah.
single supreme being who's God? A more powerful one than all the rest of them?
I guess they would be varying in power. According to the Norse pantheon, Odin is the wisest of gods.
Oh, okay. Look at the light came on. Okay.
Ding. But if
Yeah.
you want to get to how the universe was created and stuff, I also
No.
hold that there's an entity or a non-entity called chaos that the universe would have sprung from, and from
Okay.
there you get the laws of logic, and from there you also get the gods. So there is one source or one author of those things, but
Okay. So
Yeah.
you have a non-falsifiable belief system.
As do you.
No,
But
mine
yes.
is.
Yours is
My belief
falsifiable. You're
system,
the first Christian I've heard to say that. How do you feel
Christianity
about
is falsifiable.
maybe Christianity as a whole?
Christianity as a
Can you give
truth
an example of
religion
how you would falsify it? I guess you might say that, like, if a prophecy was wrong or something like that.
just provide the crucified body of Christ. Now, someone might say you can't do that. Well, maybe
Yeah.
not. Maybe I could. But if there was a tomb that was discovered that had inscriptions inside of it, this is Jesus the Messiah, and it had all kinds of articles and things, and it was him, and it talked about his disciples saying certain things. I mean, and then it had crucifixion wounds in his bones and things like that. I mean, that'd be pretty tough to get over.
Right.
Okay.
It would.
And so the idea is that it's falsifiable within reason. I mean, there's no absolute proof for things unless it's mathematics and logic.
Sure.
But a sufficient thing, you know, we'd find something like that, then you could demonstrate that if you demonstrate Christ hasn't risen from the dead, then Christianity has been falsified. Okay, so it is falsified.
By the same token, if you discovered that the origin of the universe was something that wasn't chaos, my system would be falsified as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by that. But you see, the thing is
yeah, sure.
that if you're going to get into the issue of the laws of logic by which you are arguing, because you're assuming a universal absolute set of logical absolutes.
Well, I believe in universal uniformity.
Well, uniformity is just another way of saying you believe in induction.
It
about
holds with the laws of logic as well, so you can
No,
draw it out of that.
uniformity is a thing of physics.
Oh,
We're not
without
talking about
uniformity, the
physics.
laws of logic go way all kinds of different places. But
No. The laws of logic are abstractions. The universe is not.
no, but so is uniformity. Uniformity is also an abstraction.
Uniformity of the concept is an abstraction based upon the laws of logic. So you still have to presuppose the laws of logic in order to have the idea.
I think they support each other. I don't know. Maybe it's circular. I have no idea.
So the laws of logic are prior, because you must assume the law of identity so that you can understand what uniformity is. You don't assume uniformity without the law of identity. You assume that law of identity to be able to recognize uniformity. And uniformity requires certain conclusions out of deduction, because you have to say uniformity within the universe, which means you have to use induction in order to do this, and you're presupposing the laws of logic in order to do this. Okay. The reason this is important is because you can't have the universal laws of logic, which are law abstractions, in a multi-God universe without a supreme mind being the author or the necessary precondition for these universal laws.
I said earlier that the universe would have come out of chaos, that's where it would be a random collision, basically. So the laws of logic, the laws of the universe, all those things that people apply fine-tuning would have come out of that event.
Are the laws of logic chaotic?
They are order resulting from chaos.
Order resulting from chaos. How do you know that?
That's something I hold provisionally. Give me something that's against it, and
no,
we'll talk about it.
You're holding it by faith.
Yes.
Okay. So
right. And
another
my
thing
faith is provisional. I want to clarify that. My faith is provisional. If somebody gives me something that is against it, then we can examine it and talk about it, especially if it's proof. If we have some kind of verifiable
are the laws of logic
my beliefs are, then I have to change my beliefs.
Are the laws of logic abstractions?
The laws of logic abstractions. Sure.
Okay. Are they universally true?
Based on observations.
Are they universally true?
So far.
Are they dependent upon our space and time for their validity?
Are they dependent upon space and time for their validity? Maybe.
So where you go, they can change. If you're next door to my neighbor, they might change.
Oh, if you go outside of the universe, they might. That's where it might be. There's where it would be.
Wait. How do you know that would be the case?
I don't. I just said.
What you're saying is that the laws of logic would then be dependent upon the existence of the universe. If we're outside of it, then it may not be true. So then you're saying that the laws of logic are properties of the universe. There's problems with that.
Mm-hmm. What's the problem?
Properties are measurable. Like here, this is not the best example. My cell phone just happens to be sitting right here. It has certain properties: hardness, blackness, mass, and all of these can be measured. And the properties reflect the essence of something. And so when something is related to the physical, or it's properties of the physical, as in the universe, it's measurable. The laws of logic are not measurable. Therefore, they're not properties of the universe. They're independent of it. So your statement outside the universe isn't true.
That doesn't follow to me.
Properties exist because of something.
Right.
Properties are measurable.
Mm-hmm.
The heat of something, the mass, not the weight, the
And
mass
you
of
can check the
something.
laws of logic.
You can't measure the laws of logic.
You can test them, which is, I guess, how you would measure them. Like
How do
if
you
that's
test them?
by
With a
trying to
microscope?
create a situation in which they're not true. But it's mainly through thought experiments because they're
So what you're
abstractions.
saying is you're trying to use logic to refute logic.
I mean, maybe that's not a great idea.
So that's not a good idea. So you're
But
self-refuting at this point.
here's-
You see,
I'm
I'm
not
trying to show
self-refuting.
you.
Here's my assertion. My assertion is that all the observations that we have built the laws of logic on, because the laws of logic are abstractions from humanity based on our observations in the universe. So if you go outside of the universe,
That can't be the case.
it can't be the case.
Where do you observe?
That's what they are, as far as I'm
Where
aware.
do you observe the law of non-contradiction, which is an abstraction?
They're based on observations. They're not observations directly.
So they're based on your experience.
Yes.
Okay. So your experience says one thing, and my experience says another. Which one is true?
And that's when you get into like transcendental idealism and all that jazz.
This is why what you're saying doesn't work. Okay. The laws of logic are not dependent upon our experience. They're not dependent upon our location. They're not properties of the universe. They're universal abstractions.
They're culminations of observations, though.
No, they're not.
But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that
I tried to show
laws
you
of
they're
logic apply in all possible worlds, meaning outside the universe, inside the universe, wherever it is you want to put it. Let's assume that for the sake of argument and continue. I'm happy to go there.
Okay, we'll let this go for now because I want you to understand, though, I will fight to the death on this one if need be. They're not based on observations.
I'm willing to give it to you for the sake of the conversation.
Okay, and because they're not based on observations, they're independent of us, and because they're not properties of the universe, they're independent of the universe. So therefore, the laws of logic are independent of our existence and independent of the existence of the universe, yet they are universally true abstractions, which require a universal mind. That means there's an absolute mind out there. If there's an absolute
I see why you're doing this.
if there's an absolute mind, there's going to be absolute morals. Your moral non-realism is falsified now.
What if the absolute mind is a moral non-realist?
Then he would have to also be a logical non-realist.
Why?
Because logic is the reflection of the perfect mind of this being.
Right.
And what is right and wrong by intention of the heart, because this is a mind that is alive. Then the intention of his heart, let's use male gender, the intention of this perfect being's heart must be, because it can't be illogical and self-refuting and self-contradictory, must be proper. And therefore all motives would be perfect and proper. That becomes a standard of what is right and wrong.
The word proper is a subjective term, so I don't. What do you mean by proper?
Proper, it would be, let's just say...
Does he have good manners at the table, or like?
Let's just say kind of, I'll have to beg the question a little bit, or use a bit of circular reasoning in that his mind would be the standard that is right, because it's his mind. Why? Because he's absolute.
You're right, that is circular.
Yeah. We have no way. But you see, here's the thing. There's no way to get out of that. It's ultimately, and I call this the terminus. At this point, I call it the terminus. What I mean is, we can't go any further. There is no logical way to progress beyond this. God would then be the standard of absolute truth as well as morality, because both would emanate from his mind and his character. Therefore, your moral non-realism doesn't work.
Well, I mean, it works if I just get rid of the circle. You just say that the ultimate mind is a logically consistent being. You can have a logically consistent being that just doesn't care about morality at all. Like, it's not even a thing to it.
You can? How do you know that?
I mean, it doesn't seem necessary. Even as you described it, it's still not necessary.
Really? To a logical being who would know all possible logical truths about every issue of action would say there is nothing moral?
Yeah.
And so then
I could do that.
So then it wouldn't be moral, and he wouldn't have any moral right or wrong statements about torturing babies to death merely for someone's personal pleasure. It wouldn't be a moral issue for this absolute true God, would it?
Right. But we could suppose a mind that simply doesn't care about the actions of humans.
Okay. So since we have a God who exists and the laws of logic, which are reflections of his mind, are within us, then there is an interaction we have within him, and we are thinking, for lack of a better phrase, his thoughts after him. Where does our objective moral standard come from? But an objective being. Where do our laws of logic come from? From an objective being.
You're saying the laws of logic came from God?
They are reflections.
So God invented them, or?
No, they're a reflection of his eternal mind. There was never a time when he was not existing, but he always was. He didn't invent the laws of logic. They're just part and parcel of his essence.
They're like an effect of God to you.
Yeah, for better. Yeah, I think that'll work for now. It's an effect, a property.
I mean, that's fair enough. It's kind of like, so, and in that same sense, you also can apply goodness as an effect of God's existence.
Right.
On top of it.
Right. You see how this doesn't fit in your worldview? But yet it's logical.
I can imagine a mind that is logical yet evil as well.
And is evil self-refuting, self-contradictory?
No, I mean, we're talking about goodness. If you take the same thing and just reverse it and say that, well, you have a God that is perfectly logical and everything, and then he decides to say, well, I really do enjoy torturing babies. Like, I just really like to do that. So that's why he creates babies, is so he can torture them. You know what I mean?
It would be evil then to say something untrue about him. To assert.
I don't know if that addresses what I said.
Well, I'm trying to skip ahead 2 steps. By asserting a statement about God.
Which is going past what my argument was. But, all right,
I'm going to show you something.
Okay.
There is such a thing as evil. If you can assert a truth or a statement that's not true about God and his character, and then he doesn't deal with that, then he himself, you say, is evil. God could be evil. But evil means that he's doing what is contrary to his own nature.
No. Okay, yeah. That's the problem is that we're dealing with different ideas of what evil is. So, like, if you're defining evil as against God's nature, then no, God can't be evil, obviously.
There you go.
Right. But I'm looking at evil in, if you're going to say that it's absolutely immoral to torture babies, well, if God's opinion is that it's totally groovy to torture babies, then does that make torturing babies good, or does that mean that we have a God that's not really worthy of respect?
Well, what you'd be saying here is, if a square can really be a circle, then should we really believe in squares and circles?
You can have a logical God that just has a pure enjoyment of torturing babies. That doesn't seem mutually exclusive to me.
Who says you can? You do.
Yeah, but you haven't said anything against it, really.
Well, I'm just trying to show you that evil is ultimately self-refuting, because it's self-contradictory. This perfect
in this
logical
case,
mind,
it wouldn't be evil.
This perfectly logical mind would not be self-contradictory. Evil would be to say to do one thing and then do the opposite.
Right. Let's say that the God thinks that torturing babies is good, which is what I said earlier. So to say that he's evil, like you not torturing babies, that's evil. So
what you're doing is offering out of your imagination.
Yeah. Which I think is what you're doing too, if we want to get really into it.
On the contrary, we've worked from something you and I both agree exists, the laws of logic. We've worked through them logically to show they're not properties of the universe or based upon us. There must be a universal absolute mind. And I'm showing you that there's an absolute standard out there. You're trying to offer evil, which is ultimately okay.
I'll point out that I gave that to you to
ultimately
continue the conversation. I don't actually agree with that, but.
But if you're going to offer me evil as a being, as an essence of what God is, you're ultimately offering me the same being that is now self-refuting, which isn't what I'm saying.
No. I changed the wording on that. I want to point out that I did change, because I recognize what the problem was according to how you were interpreting the word evil, and changed it to just a different goodness. Like we have goodness from God. It's just that the goodness that God represents involves torturing babies for fun.
Well, if that was the case, then you would have to say from your perspective that it's a morally good thing to do.
I would say from my perspective it's not. I would disagree with God in that situation.
Oh, so then you would say then, from your subjective experience and preferences, you know better than God.
Yes. Which...
Okay.
Which
is problematic because now you're saying what truth really ought to be, what he ought to be.
I do disagree with a lot of God's commands in the Old Testament, namely with respect to stuff like homosexuality, tattoos, all that kind of stuff. So, or wearing
Tattoos,
two
the
pieces of fabric
tattoo
that are
thing,
different.
the tattoo thing has to do with the culture and the time that's different. You don't understand very much of that. The homosexuality thing goes against the created order and ultimately is an assault on the Messiah. That's a theological perspective we could talk about, and statistically, it's harmful.
But I still disagree with them. Like, so
Okay,
in the universe that we're in now, I can provide those as examples.
Wait a
of
minute. Wait a
disagree
minute.
with God.
Mr. Moral Non-Nihilist, all you're doing is disagreeing. You're not saying it's right or wrong.
Right.
Okay. So it's not right or wrong if I rob you and point a gun at you and shoot you in the leg and take your stuff, rob you. It's not right or
really
wrong,
right
is
or
it?
wrong. I defend myself against that.
Okay. So you have no right or wrong, but yet at the same time, you do
I
believe
hold
in
values. Right.
You what?
I hold values. I think that protecting the earth is something that's favorable.
Ought others do that?
Do others do that? Ought others
No,
do that?
ought.
To me,
Ought.
yeah.
Ought
To me,
others
they.
do it.
That's the thing is, if you want to view me as the authority, then yes.
So you believe that others ought to behave in a moral way that you think is right?
If you view me as the authority, yes.
No, no, no. Your perspective. Don't you see what
Oh,
you're
and then
doing?
I am the authority over myself.
No, you just said
So-
others ought to do it. You're saying there's a moral authority over them.
Right, and I qualified that I think 3 times. That if you view me as the authority, yes.
I'm not viewing you as the authority. I'm saying from
Right,
your
but
perspective.
in order to make that true, what you said, you would have to view me as the authority. If you're not viewing me as the authority, then no.
Then it's not true. Good.
Right.
If it's not true, then it's not true that they ought to take care of the earth.
Sure.
Okay. So then what
I'll
you're
bite the
doing-
bullet hard on all of this. So, like,
Yes.
yeah.
So what you're doing is just refuting yourself at every other step.
No.
Yeah.
How is that the case?
Because you say one thing, then say another. You say they ought to
I've
do
been
it,
consistent
but
the
you
entire
ought
time.
not do it. No, you have not.
Yes,
You
I
said
have.
they ought to not treat the
Me.
earth that way. Then you said there's no reason that they ought to.
All right. When you asked me, I qualified. I'm going to do 4 times now. If you view me as the authority, it's
I
going to be
understood.
yes. Right. Yeah. So I didn't contradict myself.
You said if you're not the authority, you are or are not. I understood that.
Right.
But I don't consider you to be the authority. If you were to say you are the authority, then you're saying there's a moral ought that everybody ought to obey based on your moral authority. That's absurd. If you say there is no moral authority, you're not the moral authority. It's just your opinion, but there's no moral authority. But yet you're also saying they ought to treat the earth a certain way. Then you're saying there's an ought that everybody ought to obey.
I
You're
can make
refuting
arguments to kind of try and convince you and say, like, look, doesn't this appeal to you as well?
You're not hearing what I'm saying. It's not an argument about why it's right or wrong. I'm showing you that you're being inconsistent in what you're saying about yourself or about this issue.
Where's the inconsistency? Because I'm saying,
If you say that people ought to take care of the earth,
according to me,
if it's according to you,
right?
your opinion is that they ought to do it. It's just your opinion. There is no necessity for them to abide by your opinion.
Right.
So therefore, there's no ought to them in actuality, only in your own mind.
Exactly.
All
How
right.
is that inconsistent?
No, hold on.
Okay.
And so
All right,
there is no ought in existence, then is there?
Not outside of me, no. Like
So then
outside of humanity, there's a
outside of
collective
yourself?
ought within humanity that you might be able to try and qualify. If you look at the whole of humanity and say, well, we evolved this way, we have these behaviors, and these things seem to be consistent among humans, so these are a good thing. I would to back this up, I would argue that if our ancestors were ants, we would have a completely different moral set. So to argue that there's an objective morality I mean, the only way that you could make any sort of appeal to it would be acting this way is favorable to human culture. And but even then, you're building a system of ethics. You're not actually appealing to an objective morality. Go ahead.
Ocean, you keep saying this, and that you don't believe that morals are a thing, but I cannot find any definition or reference to the word ethical or ethics that doesn't tell me that it's morals.
Well, the difference is that an ethics would be a system of morals. We can use the word. Is a system of morals that is.
Come on,
hold on.
bro.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Okay.
You're done. You just said morals don't exist, but
Sure.
ethics are morals.
Let me complete the statement before you jump on me like that. Okay. All right. So, if we're going to be using the word morals, an ethics would be ethics. A system of ethics would be a system of morals
But
if we're just using them as synonyms,
morals
that
aren't-
are from the human perspective. That it's not an objective standard. What I'm disagreeing with ultimately is objective morality. We can go with a subjective form, but I say as soon as you build a subjective model of morality in the universe, you're going with non-realism, which is what I would agree with Slick on this.
Ocean, morals don't exist, so you can't use that in your definition of ethics.
Okay, then I can simply say actions that are favorable or non-favorable, harmful or non-harmful. And
So
what is favorable and unfavorable? I mean, we'll go to how I say it. Well, how I say it, I don't use the word morals. I said morals in order to appease you. Now, with what I would see as a system of ethics is a system of where you build a system of actions that are favorable or unfavorable to different people. And people have different opinions on what is favorable and unfavorable.
So you're using favorable and unfavorable rather than good or bad.
Right, as I like it versus I don't like it. And if you want to try and imply morals to that, you can, but it's not objective morality anymore. It's something else.
And we shouldn't be having a discussion with you about what is right or is wrong, because you're admitting there is no right or wrong.
Exactly.
So the fact that you're arguing about this is an inconsistency again on your part.
No. Because I can say that, look, this idea of objective morality, that there's an absolute of morality across the board, is incorrect, while still advocating for certain actions being favorable towards human culture.
The issue of favorability about what culture is what that's called logically is begging the question. You're assuming the ends is the proper goal to begin with, and that's arbitrary.
Well, here's the
truth
difference.
is not established out of arbitrariness.
I see kind of what you look. The difference is that culture changes, so different actions are going to be favorable at different times. So, and with what you're arguing is an objective morality that is unchanging.
There are standards of objective morals because you believe in justice. You have a sense of justice.
Do I?
Yeah. Have you ever shaken your fist at somebody driving down the road to cut you off? Have you ever been objective, whatever it might be, that you felt there's been a sense of wrong, a sense of injustice that's occurred?
They have committed an unfavorable action to me.
Okay.
I didn't enjoy it.
So it's not unjust.
What do you mean? Like, what do you mean by just?
Justice has to do with the law.
Okay. I mean, I believe that, humanity should have certain laws as far as a favorable structure.
And if the laws are arbitrary, then justice is arbitrary.
Sure. Like, when it comes right down to it, there's no
believe-
right way to build a legal system. When it comes right down to it, you can.
Well, we're just going in circles now.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, you're arbitrary about what you think justice is, morality is, everything else.
No, I'm not willing to recognize that there's some objective standard outside of humanity. Humanity is doing the best of what we got, which is essentially our interaction with one another and what we can see as hurting or not hurting others.
Yeah. Well, that's just another arbitrary standard that you're saying based on hurting or not hurting. You're assigning a moral value to it and don't realize you're doing that.
I saw my audio levels adjusted. Is that my cut off or?
I don't know.
Okay. Oh, you can still hear me. That's good.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was we were ending there or not. Anywho,
You're
I guess
assuming
I'll just
moral value with certain things. You're just arbitrary. You're assuming that the ends is the value that we ought to go by. Ought has to do with morality in this context.
We can turn it around. I can argue that divine command theory is really arbitrary as well.
Except it's not divine command theory. That's not the Christian perspective.
There's a lot of Christians that do hold divine command theory. But...
Well, yeah, but they're wrong. That's not what it is biblically. Okay.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Yeah, we talked about. Sure, we can wrap it up.
But enjoyed the conversation, though.
Absolutely, I did too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever sat down with a realistic nihilist and chatted?
Yes, you and I know each other.
Yeah, the two of you talk, and you're two peas in a pod, I believe. So.
We don't like each other ultimately. Well, we've gotten in a lot of fights. I do like him ultimately, but we have gotten into some scuffles. He's very not religious. I am, so we have some disagreements around that.
I would enjoy listening to a conversation of the two of you talking. Anyway, thanks for stopping by.
Sure thing.
Oh, Andrew Rappaport, how much of that did you listen to? You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying. I listened. Actually, Ocean He's been in before, and I think we've chatted with him before.
Yeah.
Nice enough fella, but it's I don't know. And I know that this will come off wrong, but I feel like it's like nailing jelly to a wall.
I don't know.
Well, I thought I reasonably demonstrated that he's inconsistent. Now, he wouldn't agree with that, but I thought I had.
Well, but one of the things I think a difference, though, Matt, between him and the other two people you spoke with is notice the difference of someone that listens. The first two guys you spoke with were in to prove an argument, and Ocean was actually dialoguing, understanding what you're saying, listening, and interacting with what you're actually saying.
It was a good conversation.
Yeah, and that's the
Well,
difference.
the other ones were good conversations too.
Though they were, the issue being is they weren't engaging with what you were actually saying, and they were.
No, maybe I wasn't communicating myself properly.
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was they don't want to hear. At least with the first gentleman, Amadeus or whatever. He when you were trying to explain what your point was and why you were explaining it, he just started laughing over you and talking over you, and then when you made the point, it was like, well, you're lying, Matt. Those are just tactics to avoid having to answer. That's what that is.
Yeah, there's a bit of a problem there. Yeah.
But I think that the difference is when you have a more honest discussion, you get a more productive one. And I think that's what we saw with Ocean.
Oh, they were good. How about anybody else in the room? Oh, wait, Tim's got to go. Isn't that usually the case? He wants to get control of it so he can kind of close it?
Yeah, but he asked me what I thought, so I answered.
Oh, okay.
And we have run later than usual, and it's because my work is delayed for tomorrow.
Oh, good.
So I can.
I saw your Philly video, incidentally.
Oh yeah, on Facebook.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hey folks, as we wrap up, Matt Slick. Let me ask you, Matt, what do you got coming up on your schedule?
Well, actually, Andrew and I are going to be heading in a week and a half or so. We're going to be meeting in Washington, D.C. for the Reason Rally. I just love that. I think it's just awesome title that the atheists claim reason for themselves. I think that's great. And then 3 weeks after that, I think, Andrew, you are coming out to Utah, and we're going to go to the annual Mormon pageant thing. And then I got to go out to July and see with Andrew. I'm just saying way too much of Andrew. I just realized that there's a problem here. That is not good. Each thing I'm doing, Andrew's involved.
Yeah, but the best part is I heard that I get to see Anik maybe at Manti. So
yeah, that's a benefit. You'll definitely get to see Anik, which is always good. Seeing me, not so much, but that's okay. Yeah, Anik always makes me look. I'm talking to Andrew, and he says the good thing is I'll be able to see you at Manti. Not that I'll be there, but that you're going to be there. You can only come, she says, if you bring Amina.
I did try to convince her. I will work on it.
Yeah, she really likes Amina. Tell her Amina to fly out here and stay with us for a few days. We'll drive out there and everything.
Yeah, she was just here. And for folks who don't know, Amina's sort of my adopted daughter, my spiritual daughter.
She's awesome. She's awesome.
But she was here this weekend. We were talking about it.
Good. Oh yeah, I hope she goes.
And then we got Jersey Fire. That one's going to be fun. You and me and Justin Peters.
Yep.
Now you've interviewed Justin on your radio program, right? He was in studio, I think, right?
Oh yeah, he was in studio. And what's interesting, I'd love to tell the story, is that he has cerebral palsy, and that while after the show, he and I were talking about Ed Romaine, a friend of mine who has cerebral palsy, and he knows Ed. And then lo and behold, while we're talking about Ed, the phone rings and it's Ed calling Justin. So Justin looks at me and goes, I don't believe it, it's Ed. Ed's calling. I go, hey, give me the phone. And so Ed is calling Justin, not knowing that Justin's on the show with me, just got finished. So he handed me the phone and I said, hey Ed, how's it going? Until he fried his brain for about 20 seconds. He didn't know what was going on. He goes, I'm calling Justin. Yeah, I know you did. You know, so it was a lot of fun. So
Yeah, he called me. You really frazzled him on that. Ed is, for folks who don't know, Ed is an open air preacher,
Yeah, he's a
and
great
he
guy.
preaches from a wheelchair. And he has, because of that, he gets away with things that just Tim, you and I could never do.
That's right.
We were, I forget where we were. We were I forget. I think it was North Carolina, and he's preaching. He's got a headset on, a wireless headset, and because of that, there's a guy that's angry at the preaching, and he can't see who it is that's preaching, and he finally yells out, "Where are you, preacher? I'm going to punch you in the nose." And Ed's sitting there right in the open. He goes, "You're going to punch a guy in the wheelchair?" And the guy looks at Ed and realizes that's who's speaking, and he walks over and apologizes and says, "Good job, man," and walks off. And Ed's like, "No one's going to hit a guy in a wheelchair."
Yeah, that wouldn't be right.
So June 3 and 4, not only will Matt Slick be there and Andrew Rappaport, but Len Pettis and Tim Hurd will be there as well. And joining us will be Ray Comfort, Living Waters.
Now, when you say joining you, you actually mean joining you.
Yes. On the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast, we might even stream it on this YouTube channel live. We might, depending on how much technology we can handle out there with with equipment that we bring. But that's Friday night. Christians are going to be gathering. Go to reasonrallyoutreach.org for information. For $25 on Friday night, you can spend hours with us. Doesn't get any better than that. Like I said, all those gentlemen are going to be there.
Should I sweeten the pot a little bit there, Tim?
Sure.
All right. So, and as you know, because you and I talked during the week, this has been changing almost daily. We keep getting new updates. But for the first 200 people that register at reasonrally.org, they will be getting a copy of Ray's new book, and he will be there to autograph it.
Nice. Nice. See, I didn't know that. And Ray Comfort does not come out to the East Coast very often.
Yeah, I don't think he's been out since I think it was like the first or second season of Way of the Master, which is going on like 7 to 10 years, I think.
Yeah. So Andrew Rappaport pulled his strings and got Ray Comfort to come out here. So opportunity to see him and to be trained in evangelism in preparation for going out and interacting with the non-believers on Saturday. So we're getting together on Friday, and then Saturday, Ray Comfort and Living Waters will be out there and doing all kinds of recording for upcoming shows and stuff. And go to reasonrally.org for more information. We would love to see you folks there. I think that's about it. Matt Slick, you going to be here next week?
Here being Washington, D.C.?
No. Here on the Google Hangout. It's Memorial Day weekend next weekend.
I guess.
Are we going to?
Yeah, I don't see why not. See what happens.
Andrew, are you gonna be here next week?
Yeah, because I have no friends to have barbecues with, so I'll just be sitting and.
Well, maybe if you invite anybody to your house, you might show up.
Timmy, you want to come over? I'll throw some burgers on the grill.
No, I said friends. I said friends. Invite some friends over. Thank you, everybody, for listening. For more information about Matt Slick, of course, go to carm.org. For more information about Andrew Rappaport, go to strivingforeternity.org. And BibleThumpingWingnut.com. Until next time, take care and God bless.
God bless.